The Great Canadian Gun Ban is back. It is slightly different than it was under G4 and G46, and in a way, it's worse. In some ways, it's better. There's still an element of the unknown. So I'm just going to get straight into it. What is the new definition? What has changed? Well, the new definition is that a prohibited firearm would now also include a firearm that is not a handgun and that discharges centerfire ammunition in a semi-automatic manner, was originally designed with a detachable cartridge magazine with a capacity of 6 cartridges or more, and is designed and manufactured on or after the day on which this paragraph comes into force. Now, that is actually a significant change, and if you had just read that definition alone, without any of the other stuff I will talk about, that is quite a walk back from the Liberals. That definition basically means every gun that currently exists, including the Raven 9s and the WKs, and literally every gun that currently exists and has a FRT entry, would be legal in Canada, and it would be legal after Bill C-21 passed with this amendment. And this amendment will pass. It has the support of the Bloc and the NDP. It's just a matter of when it passes. Now, today in committee, the Conservatives are filibustering and they're trying to make this as painful a process as possible. There is discussion about whether it's in scope or not. The Liberal Party chair of the committee basically said, fuck you, I'm not ruling this out of scope, even though it totally should be. It has to go to third reading before it goes out of scope. Now, for it to get to third reading, that means they have to get through all of the amendments, and then they have to create a final report and submit it to the House, and that is where the third reading of the bill is. Now, the good thing is that there are apparently 146 amendments. I think there is 160 odd pages of amendments. They have 7 weeks from now until the summer break. There is no chance they do every single amendment before they go into summer break. It's very likely that third reading will occur sometime in October, maybe November, depending on how delayed they are. But that's not all. And this is where it gets really not good. As well as setting up the this new definition, they are not bringing back the list, G46. That was the list of guns that included Mausers and the Ross number, not Ross, that single shot Ruger number 1, the SKS, the M1 Garand, that wouldn't be banned by the definition anyway. And so that list doesn't exist. It's not being submitted into Bill C-21. Instead, what they're doing is they're resurrecting the committee. I can't remember the name of the committee. I'll put it up on screen here. Now, that committee is not made up of members of parliament. It's made up of, well, in previous years, it was made up of industry members, of, I believe, police, and also gun control members. And that is still happening. So the committee will be made up of all these different groups, and it's tasked by August 31st of this year with recommending a list of guns that can be prohibited via an order in council, like was done in May 2020. So basically, the definition is going to capture all the guns that would be banned from the royal assent date onwards, and then this committee is tasked with banning all the guns that exist now. But, and that's really bad. but there is a tiny bit of opium that you can try and take from this. So, the last time this committee existed, it was pretty much deadlocked. There was no movement that could really happen. It was not a functional committee. And in fact, it was so dysfunctional that the gun control lobbyist Pauli, they quit it. They just straight up quit it. And this time around, they are actually incredibly pissed off. And normally, that's very good for gun owners when they're pissed off, because they think that the Liberals aren't going to do anything. But all the other gun control groups in Canada are quite happy about it. So what is good, what is bad? What does it really mean for the future? And that's unknown. Will the Liberals actually ban the guns that are recommended? Because if you look at the definition, it looks like they're retreating really hard, and they don't want to have to deal with any more confiscation of guns that they're already struggling to do. So what about the committee? Will they recommend all these different guns? Will it be functional? We don't really know. My personal guess, is that it will be structured in such a way that the gun control proponents are going to be favored. So I think they would have a majority. But again, maybe not. If the Liberals really don't actually want to hear any reports from this committee, they'll make it deadlocked, and then nothing will ever actually get passed. And they'll never have anything to recommend. But we don't know. It's not a good situation in any way. And it means that the timeline for guns to be banned was actually sped up. Previously, under G4 and G46, those guns would have been banned likely sometime between December and February. Now it's looking like they're going to be banned before then, in the summer, maybe in September. How big will the list be? What's it going to consist of? No one really knows. And so this leads into the ordering councils. Ordering councils are theoretically easier to overturn. It only requires a minority government to overturn ordering councils. Now, there's a bit of confusion around ordering councils and how they can be done exactly, and no one really knows. The ordering council process now does not allow for a gun to be taken from prohibited or restricted and moved into non-restricted. But it could theoretically be possible for the ordering council that made these guns restricted or prohibited to be revoked, and then by default they're moved back to non-restricted or restricted, depending on what the classification was originally. So it's possible. It's just fairly confusing in terms of ordering councils, but don't even bother going there yet. Seriously, you need a conservative minority government, and there's no signs of an election immediately. Maybe from the fall onwards. And one last thing that needs to be mentioned are the magazine changes, and these have generated a lot of confusion. Now, in the statement, magazine changes sounds like they're going to prohibit all non-handgun magazines, so all long gun magazines, regardless of whether they are rimfire or manual action, to 5 rounds, which I don't think can be understated how insane that is. That bans guns like the Lee Enfield, or a whole bunch of tube-fed 22s. So And the thing is there's been no clarity on that. No one has been able to get any real clarification from the minister or anyone at the Liberal Party about what they're actually trying to do. Now, it's confusing because a few months ago they released a report on processes that happened during the SECU committee, and that report detailed that it sounded like magazines that were pinned would no longer be allowed, that they would remove pinning and only factory 5-round magazines would be allowed to be imported and sold in Canada, which would be better, but not great. And the one thing that's been consistent, though, across everything is that it sounds like all of them are going to be grandfathered. I think they realize how insane it would be to mandate all of these things be modified. So it sounds like they're going to be grandfathered as is. And then from there, it'll just be no new sales and no new transfers. But we don't know when that's coming, exactly how it's coming. No one really knows. And one final thing, they did actually pass something at SECU today, at the Public Safety Committee today, and that has to do with parts. So, as most of us should know, the frame is the legal firearm. Any of the parts that are not the frame are completely unregulated. Now, in Europe, this isn't really the case, but in Canada and the United States, it is. And part of their fight against ghost guns, they are mandating that all barrels and slides at the very least, excuse me, all barrels and slides at the very least will be required to have a PAL. You will need to show your PAL like you do when you buy ammo, for example. Which, honestly, if you think the licensing system is useful and good, it makes sense. If you think licenses shouldn't exist, well, this is just more stupidity. But under the guise of licenses, it does make sense, and it's really not the biggest outrage to most people. It's not. Will it stop ghost guns? Probably not. Um, Almost certainly not, especially as the technology gets better. But it is worth mentioning. So that is basically it for the update on what these things are. Now, if you want to follow along closely, I would recommend you look up the Canada Guns politics thread. So Reddit r/Canada Guns. There's a weekly politics thread. This current week's politics thread is filled with a whole bunch of discussion about what's happening and what's not happening. If you don't want to go on Reddit, I would recommend looking on to Twitter, following the CCFR, following Tracy Wilson, and also following Caliber Mag. He has been a little bit more rational about what's going on, and he's a little more realistic about what's going on. And also Tim Thurley. He is not really a member of the gun community per se, but he provides a lot of rational thinking around gun policy in general. So I'll have them all linked down below in the description. And also for Caliber Mag, I would recommend watching his live stream that he did. That's on his YouTube channel. I'll link that as well. If you want to get a different perspective on it. But that about does this video. I will be having some new firearms to review. I think this weekend I'm going to review the Feyachi V30. And then sometime in the middle of next week, I am hoping to review or do an overview for a new gun. And then on the weekend of the week after, I will do the 1000 round review of the Savage 64 Precision. And then the Wednesday after that, I'm hoping to do the first shots of that new gun. So I do have a bunch of content coming up. Make sure you subscribe to see all the reviews. Share the videos if you think someone's going to be interested in them or they want to see a gun that they might want to buy. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching.